Namaskar and welcome back to Media Scan, your weekend dose of headlines, controversies and perspectives. Of the 5 states going to polls, votes have already been cast in 2 and the election fever is at a pitch in the other 3. Campaigning is on at a fast, crazy pace, but so are the attacks and counter-attacks. Apart from the top headlines, we have a very special segment this evening where we are going to bring to you the findings of an eye-opening report about how some of the top publications in the Western media treat socio-political issues in our country and why. But first up, what made news? The UP-Bihar ke bhaiye remark by Punjab Chief Minister Charanjit Singh Channi has riled the Congress party no end. During a campaign with Priyanka Gandhi Vadra, Channi welcomed her as a daughter-in-law of Punjab and then commented that people from UP Bihar would not be allowed into Punjab. From Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Bihar CM Nitish Kumar, everyone called out the CM for his divisive comment. Later, Channi clarified that he meant AAP leader Arvind Kejriwal and not the people of UP Bihar, but the clarification did not seem to cut much ice. The high-voltage Punjab campaign wound up on Friday and votes will be cast on Sunday. Goa voters emerged a winner by casting nearly 80% votes earlier this week. Uttarakhand and UP followed with over 62%. While Goa and Uttarakhand had a one-day voting, UP has completed 2 phases out of the total 7. Campaigning for the rest of the 5 phases is reaching a peak in Uttar Pradesh now. PM Modi is leading the charge with Amit Shah, Yogi Adityanath and JP Nadda from the BJP, while Akhilesh Yadav is steering the campaign for Samajwadi Party. SP founder and veteran leader Mulayam Singh Yadav also made a brief appearance in the campaign this week. With the High Court bench still hearing the petition and girls in some colleges refusing to attend classes without the hijab, the controversy kept Karnataka on edge for the most of the week. Following the court directive, colleges had asked the female students to remove their hijab. While the Petitioners' Council has argued that the girls have a right under the constitution to put on their hijab in keeping with the color of the uniform, the state government is sticking to its position of no hijab inside classes. With former Central Minister Ashwini Kumar saying goodbye to the party, Congress suffered yet another jolt, and that too just before Punjab goes to polls. Kumar complained about how Congress did not have transformative, inspiring leadership anymore. He also pointed out that the culture of consultation and discussion was now over. Another senior leader, Manish Tiwari, also from Punjab, created a flutter by tweeting a couplet which roughly means if I speak, it'll be a revolt, and if I keep silent, I feel helpless. Interesting message there. Trinamool Supremo Mamata Banerjee has made it clear that she does not want to include Congress in the new front of non-BJP chief ministers that she is trying to forge. Banerjee is in touch with Telangana CM K. Chandrasekhar Rao, Maharashtra CM Uddhav Thackeray, and also Jharkhand CM Hemant Soren. Meanwhile, Rao is scheduled to have a luncheon meeting with Uddhav Thackeray on Sunday. Earlier this week, he drew sharp reactions from BJP when he supported the Congress demand of providing evidence for India's surgical strike inside Pak-occupied Kashmir. Viewers, in this unique research, senior journalist in Prasar Bharati Amol Parth meticulously studied more than 3,000 articles of the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, The Time magazine and The Guardian. Altogether, 500 articles, that is at least 100 from each publication, were sampled. So let's see what we found out. I'll start with the headlines. In these 500 articles, the most commonly used headline words were fear, hate, violence, riot, Hindu, Muslim, Kashmir, cow, mob and protest. In fact, every one of the 5 articles in all these publications had Hindu and Muslim in the headlines. It's no rocket science to understand that this is a blatant attempt to provoke, to exploit obvious fault lines. But it doesn't end there. By disproportionately playing on these issues, they not only threaten peace and harmony, but actually jeopardize India's economic interests globally. To understand things more precisely, we bring you some specific case studies from that entire report. Let's start with the latest. You have been following serious developments in Canada over the truckers' strike for weeks. Let's see this New York Times comparative headline image. See what it says about India and then Canada. Similar situation? When India, it is curtailing of free speech and dangerous path of intolerance. When it's Canada, it is why hasn't Justin Trudeau ordered to quash the demonstrators? Let's check out the COVID coverage. In April 2021, BBC had this scary headline which read, "Harrowing scenes from India show the extent of the crisis gripping the nation as the second wave of coronavirus brings the death toll to over 2 lakhs. Where were these headlines? When lakhs of people died in the US, UK and many European countries at the peak of the first wave in November 2020, December 2020 and then January 2021. Check out this graph, both of the US and the UK. Okay, third sample coming up from a different sector. When India declared its intent and policy to promote indigenous industry, this New York Times report painted it as an obstacle in India's growth. Wait, it didn't end there. NYT also raised the provocative issue that Modi government was pushing for Hindu traditional attire such as the sari. In the process, completely forgetting or hiding the fact that a huge number of weavers engaged in the Banarasi sari industry and elsewhere in the country are essentially Muslims. Strange omission. Let's check out another story. Again, New York Times. When a truck driver ran over some people in Lower Manhattan in 2017, it was labeled a deadliest terror attack. But in India, when 40 of our paramilitary soldiers were killed in a dastardly terror attack, which Jaish-e-Mohammed claimed officially, they called it an explosion. Well, here's some more. See for yourself this cartoon published in the New York Times trying to run down our budget space mission. Of course, there was a furor over it. NYT was called out for its completely racist treatment and it had to clarify under pressure. Okay, there's time for just one more case study. When Indian diplomat Devyani Khobragade was arrested and India pointed at diplomatic immunity, the NYT editorial read, "India's misplaced outrage." You know that it was about US rules not applying to certain actions of a maid. But in Kenya, an American diplomat killed a father of 3 whose widow was pregnant. The diplomat was whisked away within a day, claiming, of course, diplomatic immunity. One set of rules, one set of editorial policy for an Indian diplomat, a completely different set of rules and editorial policy for their own US diplomats. Viewers, nothing happens without a reason. So, we cannot wind up this study or this discussion without understanding how or why some of the most prestigious publications and media houses behave in this particular manner, their treatment, their editorial policy when it comes to India. Well, it's about grabbing eyeballs and the hits. One may ask, so what is new? That's how the media industry functions. Yes, it does. But there is a particular and interesting situation with regard to our country. India has a whopping 130 million English-speaking population. That's rank number 3 on the globe. Now, experts believe these publications have either reached a saturation in their home countries and neighborhood, or their readership/viewership is steadily declining. So, of course, they are looking for greener pastures, new markets. And what better market than India? Now, the point is, there is cutthroat competition going on to grab that segment in our country, and everybody believes sensationalizing, playing up fault lines, overhyping the negative, while totally bypassing all the good work is the best way to surge ahead in this rat race for readership and viewers. And this is not a random comment. Our study has thrown up interesting findings which shows this is precisely what happened with the help of a lot of data. So let's check out some of those very interesting data charts, all of them from the CAMScore data. The New York Times. This newspaper, during the period from March 2019 to March 2021, that is a 2-year period, their readership went up by an interesting 22%. But globally, their readership was down by more than 8%. So while the newspaper, there are less readers for it in the rest of the world, its readership in India is going up. This again is the chart for the same corresponding period, that is March 2019 to March 2021, but for the Wall Street Journal. What happens here? The Wall Street Journal grew much faster in India than its growth in the rest of the world. In the rest of the world, its growth was less than 2% or just nearly 2%. In India, it grew at a pace of 2.60%. Clearly, more people read the Wall Street Journal in India when you compare with more people reading it in the rest of the world. Another very interesting chart, again the well-known Time magazine. In the rest of the world, you can see from here, the readership of the Time magazine declined by 31%, which means 31% people who were previously reading the Time magazine decided not to read it anymore. Now what happens in India? In India, its readership grew by 49%, nearly 50, which means you can see how these newspapers have been gaining in terms of readership, or we may say business, when it comes to India, whereas in the rest of the world, they have been facing reverses and decline. The last data in this segment, and I come to the BBC, and this, viewers, is really interesting. Look at the BBC chart. The BBC for the same period, March 2019 to March 2021, its growth in India was a whopping 173%. In the rest of the world, it grew by just about 35%. What does that mean? In India, the BBC and its following, its viewership, grew by at least 5 times more than its growth in the rest of the world. Clearly, very telling data giving us indication of what's going on. Viewers, I just have time enough for some very clinching data, and you will know what I meant about the overhyping and sensation making. Let us look at the month-on-month charts for the same period that we were discussing, and we are featuring here the same publications that I spoke about. Look at the chart. These are the readership data charts of the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, The Guardian and BBC. Now look at the month-on-month charts. Their readership surged like anything from December 2019 and then started declining after March 2020. Why was that? Guess what? Those were the months when the anti-CA protests were hogging all the front pages. And that is when suddenly these newspapers and their following, their readership, surged ahead to a peak, slowly declining in the following March when the violence took place in Delhi, and after that the protests were over. The country was practically in a lockdown due to the first wave of the COVID pandemic. Viewers, let me show you some very clinching data here regarding the readership of these newspapers we have been discussing, and you will know what I meant about the overhyping and sensation. These are month-on-month charts for the newspapers that we discussed during the concerned period. We have the readership data of the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, The Guardian and BBC. For all of these organizations, their readership and following surged in December 2019 and then started declining by March the next year. Guess what was the period we are talking about? Those were the months when the anti-CA protests were hogging all the front pages from India. As soon as the violence happened in Delhi, slowly things started getting cooler, and meanwhile, the first flush of the COVID pandemic had hit the country. The country was practically in a lockdown. There was not much to sensationalize, and so the readership data shows a decline. So those were some of the most interesting findings and highlights of a much exhaustive report, a larger analysis that I was talking about here. Viewers, it's time to wind up the discussion, but before that, there are a couple of issues we have been trying to gauge and would like to share with you. I have been talking to many people who know their job, and there are certain things which come out and have also been corroborated in this research. And that is, India may be a huge market for these top-line publications of the world, but clearly, while they are interested in the business, they have not devoted the kind of human resource to our country that is expected from a country of more than 1 billion people. So what happens here? They have a few people to cover India, a country with so many diversities, with so many multi-layered angles and considerations, and the social fabric and its history and cultural diversions. And even those few people are not always devoted to India. They have to cover happenings in other Southeast Asian countries. Now what happens here is, with this limited human resource that they have devoted to India, they usually rely on certain elite clubs who explain and try to influence their reporting, their writing, which is colored by their own political agendas and their backgrounds. And therefore, what comes out as the end result is the kind of stories, headlines and issues that we were discussing during this episode all throughout. However, that is for those publications to understand and to resolve. What I want to stress here, and we would like to tell you repeatedly if needed, is the next time you feel interested and read the reports vis-a-vis India in any of these publications and some others as well, these were just a sample. Please bear in mind that their coverage of India is based on the fact that India is a new emerging market for them, which is all fine. But if it does not reflect the needs, the aspirations and the successes of an aspirational India, the new India that we see here all the time, and we are all living it, then there must be something seriously wrong. And that is what needs to be borne in mind the next time you read or you follow any report thinking it is an innocuous news story. I shall have to leave it at that. But of course, this is a much larger question, And as I said, here on Media Scan, we have been raising it sequentially in many of our episodes. So, do keep watching DD India as we here continue to scan the media for you. Good night.